Hello, everybody. Hope you had a nice day till now. And I certainly hope you're not tired enough for this last session. All right, let's get the show on the road. Okay. All right. This session is on Samsung Knox, specifically how to enable zero-day access for the latest and greatest features of Samsung Knox on your EMM consoles. My name is Rajiv. I am from the product management team here in SRA, based out of Mountain View. We'll quickly take a look at, set the context in terms of what is Knox, why should you even care about this session, right? And then we take a quick look at what KSP is, which is a Knox service plugin, which is our latest innovation in terms of how to enable Knox and bring them to our joint customers faster. And we look at a few things in terms of what does it really mean to enable KSP, right? What are the, X number of things that you need to do to reap the benefits of KSP going forward. And lastly, we'll also take a quick look at a few other non-technical things that you might want to consider when you develop for KSP, right? First off, what really is Knox? I'm sure people here already know a lot, but just so we are all talking the same language and making sure we understand the context correctly, a quick look at what really Knox is. It's an umbrella term. It's an offering with multiple solutions, a suite of solutions that essentially enable enterprise mobility with productivity and manageability baked into the device, right? Along with the latest and greatest security features. At its core, it's actually split into two parts. One is our device software, which is hardware-backed security that hardens the root of trust for all the Samsung Knox devices, and a suite of cloud solutions that basically enable you to out-of-box configure Knox devices and be able to manage them in a more streamlined fashion for larger deployments, right? So today's focus is really on the device side. We are not going to be talking much about the cloud division part, but the KSP, or when I say how to enable Knox, what we are really talking of is how do I enable the access to various features that the device ships out of the box, right? So with that context, why is this even important? Why is the security and the Knox platform for enterprise, as we call it on the device side, really important for you? Because there are 1 billion plus devices out there. We are one of the largest OEMs and a vendor of choice for a lot of enterprises that want to do B2B mobility deployments, right? We are available and purchased by customers in 80 plus countries. We are rated highly by a bunch of governments, as well as we have very strong ratings from Gartner and other industry evaluators, independent evaluators. What does this story tell you? It tells you the fact that the devices that customers want come with guarantees that even the governments and individual evaluators really appreciate. And these features are something that your customers definitely want to access. So there is a win-win solution to be had if we were to develop ability for customers to use all the latest and greatest Knox features, right? And what are those Knox features? So here are some examples of the device-side solutions or device-side features that Knox today supports. In particular, I want to call your attention to things like the non-bypassable VPN, which we support with in a bunch of partners. Then we have the dual data at rest encryption. This is our latest feature in the market where all your workspace data is encrypted twice. One in the hardware, the other is in the software solution. So you could, if you don't trust, for example, the encryption that comes out of the box on the device, you could always have your own software vendor plug into this and protect all your workspace data by dual encryption at rest, right? Similarly, we have recently come up with what we call as a deep customization feature. I'm sure companies, people who have deployed devices always had this issue of, they'll buy 1,000 devices and then they have to go through a bunch of settings, configure a few things to on, a few things to off, do a lot of setting before the customer actually can use this device, right? That's typically called as your staging and kitting process. What deep setting customization does is gives you a bunch of controls by which you could toggle a various set of settings. Like, for example, I can enforce roaming, for example, to be off, right? I could say the brightness level has to be at 60%, no matter what. I could, by default, set, we have what is called as adaptive Wi-Fi, where the Wi-Fi and LTE automatically switch if the Wi-Fi connection is not good or the LTE connection is not good, right? These are all features that are there as end-user features in the device settings. Today, the user has to go to the device setting, go to a bunch of menus, and enable or disable this. What deep setting customization does is provides the IT admin of the enterprise the controls required to set these settings, and also the ability to either hide or disable these settings for the user. So as an end user, you could potentially not allow them to change the setting for your deployments. Think of it, if your transport fleet, for example, has devices and you don't want them going and toggling this adaptive Wi-Fi because you want this connectivity always on, that's one thing that you could potentially do with deep setting customization, right? Similarly, we have network platform analytics, universal credential management. Again, these are all greatest features that really help you address specific use cases. For example, with UCM, you could have a a smart card with your secure credentials and use that for encrypting or decrypting or signing your emails. That way, what you're basically doing is your credential, end user credential is never on the mobile. It's always on a smart card that hangs on my lanyard, right? And until I tap it on my mobile, it actually doesn't encrypt or decrypt the email. And this is in addition to, mind you, all the encryption and the security features that the device ships with. So these are all some of the differentiated features that you should really care about. Visit our Knox website, understand a lot more about these features. And the reason all these are important is these are features that KSP helps bring to your customers without additional developments, meaning it's a one-time development by which you will be able to use all these features, right? And today, some of our closest partners have already enabled some of these features, while we continue to work with them to enable support for KSP as well as native support for a lot of these features, right? So that brings us to the question of why KSP, right? So far we have seen what is Knox, what is the Knox platform and enterprise, which is our device-side security and manageability software stack. And now let's look at why KSP. Right? With the traditional way we have developed these features, there's been a three-pronged issue. One is, as Samsung, we keep releasing greatest features with every device software. So when we released the Note 10, we have a new feature. With the S10, we released a few more new features. So Knox is an evolving software stack, which also means we keep adding features, which are a bunch of APIs. The problem naturally for our partners, EMM device management partners, is how many of these APIs can I support? 100, 500, 1,000? At what point does the ROI really doesn't pan out? Because every time there's a new API, new integration, there's a cost incurred by our partners to actually support those APIs, right? And then for the end customers, the real big challenge is that they want some of the greatest features. So they go out, look at, say, Samsung S10. They are impressed by the Samsung DeX features. They want to deploy it in their enterprise. They buy these devices and then realize, oops, the partner still doesn't support the necessary API integration, or probably the front end doesn't support certain settings that are still required. So there are always challenges between what the customers want versus how much the partners can integrate versus how do you keep up with the latest features that Samsung is implementing, right? Any solution to address this problem has to have three aspects. One, first and foremost, is for you as partners and developers, it has to reduce the total cost of the ownership. That's the challenge that we have faced in the last 3 years, where every time Knox upgrades, we have to go work with each partner to upgrade, right? So how do I make a solution that potentially is developed once and continue to use forever, right? The second and foremost challenge is ultimately the customers have to have access to all the features, regardless of which solution partners they choose. Because no customer remains static, they have their own preferences, and as the business evolves, they might want to work with multiple partners. And it shouldn't be a matter of concern that, okay, if I choose one partner over the other, I lose a set of features, right? Last and but not the least is the zero-day support. This, from a Samsung point of view, this is what really drives us to develop this solution. It's because when I, as Samsung, develop a new feature, I shouldn't have to worry about how long will it take for the customers to use this feature, get this feature in their hands. We want them to be able to use it the day after I release this feature in the market, right? So the solution has to have all these three dimensions. And that's what the Knox service plugin tries to achieve, right? So with that context, let's take a look at what KSP is and how does it work. At its core, just to set the context correctly, right? I want to reiterate this aspect that KSP is a channel. It isn't a solution. It's not a new solution. Samsung Knox, for those of you who have worked with us, know that we have a bunch of Knox solutions. When we say Knox, it's one umbrella term for things like KME, KPE. We have a fascination with all things K, right? So we have a lot of those Ks, and this is one more K, but what I want to assure you is it's not a new solution. It's just a channel for our customers to be able to use KPE. The solution here we are really selling is KPE. KSP is a channel to enable that, right? That said, what is it really? It's essentially an application. It's a privileged application that Samsung has developed and published in the Play Store. And once the device management solution partner develops the necessary framework, what it enables us to do is for the customers, they can use the Managed Play Store feature of Android Enterprise, look up the KPE agent, or the KSP agent on the Play Store, pull it, and start using it to apply a bunch of Knox policies on their devices, right? We'll look at the details. But the thing to take away here is, one is KSP is a channel for KPE. Second is, think of it as essentially an application, a privileged application that's available on Play Store. And you need to do two things to enable this for customers to use this on your solution on your solution suite, right? So stage one, how does an IT admin really use it? It's a two-step process. The first step of it is essentially it starts with Samsung publishing the KSP app on the Play Store. Like I said, it's already available. You can go look up on the Play Store and you will find Knox service plugin there, right? And EMM partners and developers such as yourself, B2B vendor developers, have to develop certain things to make sure that you support what is called as the OEM config standards, right? Once you enable those standards and the necessary infrastructure for that, what it enables the IT administrator of the customer is they can look up the KSP application from the Play Store, pull the app, along with what is called as the managed config schema of the app, which is baked into the app. We'll go through these details, but essentially think of it as they just pull the app. By the magic that you put into your console, they'll be able to look at all the policies that the app supports. These policies essentially reflect all the Knox things that we spoke of. Think VPN, deep setting customization, UCM. All these are essentially a bunch of policies that KSP supports, right? So they would look at this app, the policies on the app, set up the configuration as per the enterprise requirements, and save that profile to be attached to a bunch of devices and users. This is stage one. I, as an IT admin, set up the policies, store it on the consoles, ready to deploy, right? Stage two really happens when an end user joins that group, right? So this is a new employee who joins the company, and they get their device. As part of the device enrollment today to your solution, like the EMM backend already has as a logic by which you deploy your agent, you deploy a bunch of Android Enterprise policies. As part of that, what you'll also need to enable is the Managed Play Store on the device. Once you enable the Managed Play Store, the policies, the backend APIs that Play Store provides you will help you push the KSP along with the policies that were stored in the previous step to the device, right? And Play Store then takes care of installing the KSP app and then passing the necessary data so that the KSP then kicks off. It applies the Knox policies and also returns the result to your backend. Again, we'll look at details of what it really means to do each of these steps. To quickly recap, we have two steps. One is where the IT admin uses your console to actually set up the policies. The second step is where the actual policies and the app get enrolled to your user devices, right? So KSP today, like I said, it supports all these features. If once you have deployed the way we have explained in the previous thing, here are some of the features that you could readily use it. These are all tested and available today in the market, right? So we have VPN with Cisco, with NetMotion, PulseSecure, as well as StrongSpan, which is a Knox built-in VPN solution. All the Samsung DeX management policies, every single one of them is supported today. So if you were to have customers who are willing to use DeX, the easiest way for you to enable that is to simply enable KSP, right? Again, common criteria is MDFPP common criteria mode for those of you who work in the defense and the federal government space. You should be aware of this. This is one of the minimum mandatory requirements for a STIG as well, STIG compliance. And we have firewall, global proxy, enterprise billing, UCM, you name it, we have it. Right? These features, the other thing that I want to also call out are that these features are available today with Android enterprise deployments only. So for those of you, again, who know the history of Knox, we had what were called as the Knox CL and COM deployments before Android enterprise came along. And we worked hard with Google to actually unify our framework. So any deployment that works on Android enterprise automatically works for Knox. Now we don't have a separate Knox deployment. You basically deploy in Android enterprise and then enable Knox features on top of that. That's our approach now. That's how we successfully collaborate with Google to move the industry forward, right? And what I want to highlight here in this slide is essentially the fact that with all the enterprise deployments, which is the DO, or the device owner, or the fully managed device, as well as the BYOD, which is the work profile mode, KSP is fully tested, deployed today. We also support fully managed device with work profile, right? We'll, again, take a look at this, but this requires a little bit of balancing. So in KSP works with co-op mode. However, we will have to probably do a few additional steps as a customer. I need to do a few additional steps to actually make use of that, right? All right, so far what we have seen is what is Knox, why KSP, and how KSP works. We actually haven't seen what KSP, or what you need to do to support KSP on your solutions, right? And the crux of the matter boils down to two major things. One is you have to support what is called as the OEM config schema. This is essentially an enhancement on top of the managed configurations that was deployed, that was supported by Android Enterprise for like at least 3 years plus now, right? So think of it this way. In the past, Google has released a mechanism called managed configurations where, for example, if I'm deploying an email app, in theory, I could also configure the settings of the email app, including an account, and push it to the device. I, as an IT admin, without the end user having to do anything, can enable the email app with all the necessary exchange configuration through managed configurations, right? This is an enhancement built on top of that. We'll look at some of the details of what it constitutes to support OEM config, but that's the first and foremost thing to do. What it enables you to do is basically look at an XML that ships with our KSP app and be able to render all the Knox policies on your UI. So it's essentially a way of developing and deploying data-driven UI, right? So you don't code against our APIs, you code against a standard XML. And as long as we adhere to the XML, everything should work straightforward, and your consumers can use your console. Over the top, they'll look at the Knox policies. It's a black box for you. They look at the policies, they send a bunch of data, you just honor the data format. You don't really care what the data really is inside that format, right? The second part, once you've deployed this policy to devices, your customers will want to know the results, right? Nobody wants to deploy fire and forget. I mean, that's acceptable for certain use cases and certain deployments, but some of your customers will insist on being able to look at the data results. If I have deployed a policy to 500 devices, I want to know that there are 10 devices that failed to receive this policy, or that they could not apply this policy successfully due to an issue, right? That's the feedback channel. What it helps you do is get the results back to your console and be able to actually show those data, right? All right, so what does it mean to support OEM config schema, right? At its core, it's essentially an XML. That's a standard-driven XML. For Android, this standard is driven by Google. And this XML has a bunch of flags, essentially keys. And the data types are segregated into two types. There is a basic data type, which is Boolean, integer, string, and the regular run-of-the-mill things, right? And there's also an aggregated data types, which is bundle and bundle array. Think of it as a structured grouping of elements. So if, for example, all my VPN policies, I want to configure them in one structure. A structure here is essentially a bundle, right? If I have more than one Wi-Fi setting, that's a bundle array. A Wi-Fi setting is a bundle, and a bundle array is essentially a bunch of Wi-Fi objects in this case, right? So you need to support these data elements. In particular, I want to call your attention to something called as a hidden data element. This is not something this is there in the spec, but most solution vendors forget to implement this. And this is important for KSP because we do have a value a field. For example, the example I quoted here, sorry, verbose mode, all right. There's an example in the KSP schema, which actually is a hidden element. What it means is that that's an element that has to be passed to our app, but it's not something that the user should see or edit on the console, right? And the second thing that you might want to particularly pay attention to is this 4-level nesting. In the past, banished configurations were flat structures, right? So you could list a bunch of settings as an XML, push it, support it on your console, and push it to the device. That's it. But with Knox, we have like 500 odd policies. If I have a running list of 500 items, the users can't make head and tail out of it. So we have to group them into structures, and we nest them into structure inside structure, or a bundle inside a bundle, right? So for KSP, at the barest minimum, you need to support 4 levels of nesting. That's an additional thing that you make sure that your backend as well as your front end can support it. Once you've done this, you're good to go as far as the schema is concerned, right? Here's an example of how the schema would look like on an actual EMM console. This is one of our partner consoles. And here's a structure of how the KSP schema itself is structured today. We have 4 major elements. There are some common elements. There is the device-wide section. These are policies that apply at the device-wide level, meaning if I, for example, disable call or messaging controls, right? They apply at device. It doesn't matter whether you have a work profile or not. The entire device has that restriction. Then we have the work profile specific restrictions which take place or which are applicable only inside the work profile and the apps that run within that. And then we have a bunch of common configurations, right? Again, a lot of these details are available online. The link is at the end of this deck, but it's a quick intro on what really goes in the KSP app, right? The second part is the feedback channel. As I mentioned, the goal of the feedback channel is to really get the results back from the device. Each of these devices, mind you, you might have deployed to 500 devices, 1,000 devices. What you're really doing is getting the result back from all these devices, all the KSP instances there, right? Again, Google has provided documentation on how to support this. At the top level, what you will really get is a timestamp. The app package here will be KSP's app package. The keys, so just to quickly give you a recap this thing. So this is the key that I'm talking of, right? So verbose mode is one of the keys. Each policy in the KSP app has a unique key. And in the feedback channel, what you're really getting is that key. For example, in this case, I'm saying, okay, for a VPN case, I'm giving you a feedback saying, okay, VPN has been successfully applied, right? The other case, as an example, I'm showing that inside the work profile, the PO indicates the work profile. This is a multi-factor auth, right? That has failed. And it also comes with a helpful error code and stuff that helps your IT admins debug and fix this. It's very likely a policy conflict that's leading to this problem, right? So the data field is another field which Google has defined, but we don't really use it in KSP. Again, as the solution evolves, if you have ideas on how to use this, happy to reach out. We are happy to collaborate with you. Please reach out to the Knox team, and we'll help figure out how to make the best use of that field. Today, we don't use it, right? The other thing important thing to understand is there are 2 ways to get feedback, to support feedback channel or get the result back, right? For those of you who have a device agent running on Android devices, managing the work profile or the device, you could potentially get the result as an intent on the device itself. So the KSP application throws an intent that you could locally capture, and you can take a quick action on the device, or you could send it back to your backend, probably both, right? The alternate way of doing it is that your backend integrates the Google Play EMM APIs and gets the result from the server backend, rather than you having to implement any additional changes on the agent. Both are equally valid. It depends really on what your customer base wants and what works best for your solution. For example, if you are deploying or you have customers who are significantly into on-prem deployments where you want finer grain control, you might want to choose the on-device. But if your concern is really cloud-based cloud-based deployments, and you want to go faster to the market, you might want to evaluate the server-based approach, right? Okay. So far what we have covered is technically what does it mean to integrate and support KSP. Essentially, again, 2 things, right? The OEM config schema, the feedback channel. There are other things that you will need to consider. By itself, the technology is a means to an end, but the first most important thing is the design aspect of it. What we have realized early on working with some of our partners is that without a proper usability on the console, it leads to a very, very confusing experience for our users. So some UI elements or design languages are better suited than others. A quick summary, again, happy to work with you offline. We'll go through all the details. We'll share you some of our guidelines in terms of what we recommend and what we don't recommend. But a quick summary is that make sure you have a hierarchical structure. The whole idea is that Knox has a lot of policies, and if you don't group them and show them in a hierarchy, or you show them in a running list, it's going to be really confusing to the user to figure out what falls under what am I really setting out of 500 policies, right? The other is always try and show the full policy title. We have seen implementations where the policy title is truncated. That makes it difficult for the user to figure out what exactly, because some of the policy names are kind of similar except for the last word or two, right? So you might want to show the full policy. Similarly, all this, each individual policies item comes with a help description that helps the user in terms of what they are really supporting, right? I mean, like, what is a VPN flag? What is this field inside VPN? What is that field inside, say, restriction? So you have to show an appropriate. Too much information is difficult. At the same time, too less is also a problem. What we recommend is that you show the full description for the level 1 and level 2 items. For level 3 and 4, you show them on demand, on hovering or as a help tip when clicked or whatever, right? So don't show all the information. At the same time, don't hide all the information. Here are a few examples on the design aspect, right? And the last thing I want to bring your attention to is the scope. In the beginning, I said that fully managed device and the other extreme, which is a work profile or BYOD, are fairly straightforward. You deploy the KSP into that corresponding user space, and you're done. KSP takes care of the policies, gets you the result. With COPE, it's an interesting model where today, the way it's managed today, there's really two deployments. Even if you had your own device agents, you will have one copy of the agent running at the device owner mode, another copy running inside the work profile, right? KSP is again built to work in a similar analogy where you have one KSP running at the DO, one inside the PO, all right? Each of these KSPs, again, KSP, the DO side applies the DO or the device-wide policies, the PO side applies the work profile policies, and together they send the result back to the EMM backend. Again, you can get it via the server or locally on your agent. But either ways, the result is provided back to you, right? So this requires a few additional nuances that you might have to consider in your design. Primarily of which is that the feedback channel, for example, will have results from both these instances of KSP, right? So those are things that you'll need to worry about a little on your design side. So in summary, again, the critical point to understand is it's a win-win proposition, right? Samsung is one of the largest OEMs out there, and it's a vendor of choice for enterprise mobility deployments. And it is in a good faith system that supporting Knox policies is really what really helps you get your customers the ability to use the choice of their mobility vendor, as well as for us, it will really help scale and invest more in terms of the new and greatest features of Knox. Right? To support that, what we recommend is to support KSP, and to do that, you have two things to worry about. One is the OEM config, which essentially boils down to supporting the managed configurations and 4-level nesting, and the feedback channel. Right? We have documentation online, a lot of stuff that I explained in terms of what KSP is, what policies it supports, how to go set up those policies from an end user perspective or an IT admin perspective. Everything is explained there. Please visit our website and get the details. My colleague Farid is readily available to help take this collaboration deeper. If you have questions offline, I'm happy to answer the questions now. But further questions, please feel free to come back and ask us. And at any point, we're happy to help make our solutions better together for our customers. Last but not the least, please don't forget to rate this session. Hope you have enjoyed it. I'll take questions now. We have a mic there. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. All right. Thank you.
Forgive my ignorance. I'm very new to Knox.
No problem.
Starting to try to learn about it because I'm not happy with our current MDM solution. And I don't really manage it myself. Would KSP be used in conjunction with a platform like the Knox Manage? What
Yes.
would be some of the benefits to maybe using KSP alone without the other sort of Knox platform components?
It's a very good question. So today, KSP is built to work with only MDM vendors, meaning that it's not a standalone solution by itself. Like I said, the idea is to recoup some of the investment that MDM vendors have done as part of their Android enterprise integrations, right? A lot of them had to rip away old code and start afresh for Android enterprise deployments. And we don't want to go back to the drawing board and negate all the investments. So KSP today really works with EMMs. So you have to have an EMM of choice, whoever that might be, and then you can enable KSP on top of that. The other issue also to consider is KSP as a standalone entity. Like I said, it's more a channel and not a product by itself, because if we were to do that, we have other solutions already that kind of help you do, like KC or Knox Manage. And we don't want to get into that space. Like, what we really want to do is enable the access to Knox features. Sure, you can.
Yeah, so we know there's Google Zero Touch deployment.
Yes.
Can it be used with KSP? Can it be used to deploy KSP?
It's a good question. For those of you who didn't catch it, his question is, with Google Zero Touch, can we deploy KSP and would that work as a solution, right? So Google Zero Touch addresses a slightly different problem, which is out of the box, how do I get my EMM agent on the device, right? This is like a multi-step process where if I intend to use fully managed device, I give out corporate devices to my employees. My first challenge is how do I seamlessly get for example, you have an MDM-X as your preferred choice of vendor, right? How do I get the MDM-X app on the device with the necessary privileges and the necessary bootstrapping information? And how do I avoid my user having to type in a bunch of ID passwords and connect to a bunch of things, right? Zero Touch solves that. For Samsung devices, we have an equivalent, which is the KME. And KME, again, really solves the problem of how do I get the EMM vendor solution on the device, right? As I answered in the previous question, KSP comes in afterwards. So the first step is still to get the EMM solution, whatever that is. And once the EMM solution comes, the EMM then installs the KSP. To answer your question then, Zero Touch really has no business installing KSP. It doesn't achieve anything. What it needs to do is really install the MDM app on the device. Okay. Anything else? All right. I guess I don't want, oh, yeah, please.
I've got one more. For someone who's very new to Knox and wants to learn more about it, can you give me the URL to the most fundamental sort of online resource that you guys would provide?
SamsungKnox.com is the best place to start, and we have what is called as the Samsung Knox white paper there, which puts out the value prop in terms of what are the differentiated features and what do you need to do, in terms of using some of these features.
And what was that URL, SamsungKnox.com?
SamsungKnox.com. All right. All right. I think everybody's in a hurry to go home. All right. Thank you. It's been nice having you here.